Deep within the sands of time, buried beneath layers of history and forgotten memories, lies a story that unravels one of the world's most enduring conflicts. A story that didn't begin with politics or borders, but with two brothers, two others, and a promise from Allah, one that would shape the destiny of nations. This is not merely a tale of ancient rivalry. It is a divine narrative, revealed in the Quran, explaining why two peoples, sharing the same Father, worshiping the same God, and following the same moral teachings, have been locked in struggle for millennia. The origins of this conflict trace back over 4,000 years to a simple tent in the desert, where an elderly man named Ibrahim, peace be upon him, faced the most profound test of his faith. What unfolded in that tent, the choices made and the promises exchanged, would reverberate through history, explaining why the children of Isaac and the children of Ishmael would clash again and again. Yet this story is far more intricate than many realize. According to the Quran and authentic Islamic tradition, this conflict is not solely about land or politics. It concerns divine prophecy, ancient promises, and the unfolding of Allah's plan for humanity. Today, many view the Jewish-Arab conflict as a modern political dispute, one that began with the creation of Israel in 1948 or the rise of Zionism in the late 19th century. But the Quran presents a different perspective. Islamic sources reveal that this conflict was foretold by Allah, mentioned by the prophets, and has been unfolding according to divine decree since the time of Ibrahim, peace be upon him. The Quran not only recounts what happened in the past, but also hints at what the future holds, including the eventual resolution of this ancient struggle. The story begins in the ancient city of Ur in Mesopotamia, where a young Ibrahim, peace be upon him, first heard the voice of Allah, calling him to leave everything behind and journey toward a promised land. Ibrahim was no ordinary man. He was chosen by Allah to be the father of nations, the friend of Allah, and the ancestor of the greatest prophets to come. When Allah called him, Ibrahim obeyed without hesitation, leaving behind his family, his home, and everything familiar. Yet Allah's promise came with a challenge that would test his faith beyond measure. Allah promised that Ibrahim would become the father of a great nation, with descendants as countless as the stars and the sand on the seashore. There was one problem. Ibrahim was already advanced in age, and his wife Sarah had been unable to bear children. Years passed, and both began to doubt how Allah's promise could be fulfilled. It was Sarah who proposed a solution that would alter history forever. Following the customs of her time, she suggested that Ibrahim take her Egyptian maid, Hagar, as a second wife, so they might have a child through her. This arrangement was not unusual, and Sarah believed that any child Hagar bore could be considered hers and fulfill Allah's promise. Ibrahim agreed, and Hagar soon became pregnant. However, what seemed a simple solution soon became complicated. Hagar's pregnancy changed her attitude towards Sarah, and she began to look down on her mistress, perhaps feeling superior because of her ability to bear a child. This tension escalated, and Sarah, feeling threatened and humiliated, treated Hagar harshly. Unable to endure the situation, Hagar fled into the wilderness, alone and pregnant. It was there that Allah sent an angel to guide her. The angel instructed Hagar to return to Sarah and submit to her authority, but also delivered a prophecy that would echo through the ages. Her son would be named Ishmael, God has heard, because Allah had heard her suffering. More importantly, Ishmael would become the father of a great nation, his descendants countless, strong, independent, and often in conflict with others. His hand would be against every man, and every man's hand against him. This prophecy is central to understanding the Jewish-Arab conflict. The angel was not merely describing Ishmael's character, he was revealing Allah's plan for his descendants, the Arab people. They would be resilient, free-spirited, and often at odds with neighboring nations, including their own half-brothers, the children of Isaac. Hagar returned to Abraham's household and gave birth to Ishmael. For 13 years, Ishmael was Ibrahim's only son, the child of the promise, the heir to everything. Ibrahim loved him deeply, believing that through Ishmael, Allah's promise would be fulfilled. Then when Ibrahim, peace be upon him, was 99 years old and Sarah 90, Allah performed a miracle. Sarah conceived and gave birth to a son named Isaac. Suddenly, Ibrahim had two sons, two potential heirs, and two distinct paths for Allah's promise to unfold. The Quran makes it clear that Allah's plan encompassed both sons. Isaac and Ishmael were each destined to become the fathers of great nations, both carrying the blessings of Ibrahim, peace be upon him, and both worshiping the one true God. Yet their journeys would diverge, and their descendants would often find themselves in conflict. Isaac would become the forefather of the Israelites, through whom Allah would send many prophets, including Musa, Dawood, Suleiman, and Isa, peace be upon them. Ishmael, meanwhile, would become the father of the Arabs, from whose lineage the final prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, would arise, and who would receive the final revelation, the Quran. However, fulfilling this divine plan required a painful separation. As Isaac grew, old tensions between Sarah and Hagar resurfaced. Sarah, worried that Ishmael, her older stepson, might claim the inheritance she believed was Isaac's alone, demanded that Ibrahim send Hagar and Ishmael away. Though this troubled Ibrahim deeply, Allah reassured him that through both sons great nations would emerge. With a heavy heart, Ibrahim obeyed. He left Hagar and Ishmael in a desolate valley, barren and devoid of water or habitation, a place that would one day become the holy city of Mecca. As he departed, Hagar cried out, asking why he would leave them in such a harsh place. Ibrahim explained it was by Allah's command. Trusting in Allah, she said, "Then Allah will not let us perish." Her faith that day became a timeless example for all believers. When the water Ibrahim had left ran out, baby Ishmael cried in thirst. In desperation, Hagar ran between the hills of Safa and Marwa 7 times, searching for water or any sign of help. Today, millions of Muslims retrace her steps during Hajj to honor her unwavering faith. Eventually, exhausted and despairing, she returned to find a miraculous spring had appeared beside Ishmael. This spring, known as Zamzam, continues to flow today and is considered among the most blessed waters on earth. The presence of Zamzam drew the Jurham tribe, who sought Hagar's permission to settle in the valley. She agreed, and Ishmael grew among them, learning their language and customs. When he reached adulthood, he married a woman from the tribe and fathered many children. His descendants multiplied, spreading across the Arabian Peninsula and forming the various Arab tribes. Meanwhile, Isaac remained with Ibrahim and Sarah, and his descendants became the tribes of Israel. The separation of the two brothers was far more than a family matter. According to the Quran and Islamic tradition, it was a crucial part of Allah's plan for humanity. Both sons were blessed, both loved by Allah, and both assigned pivotal roles in human history. Yet their separation created two distinct peoples, with unique cultures, languages, and relationships to divine guidance. This set the stage for the complex relationship between Jews and Arabs that would unfold over millennia. Years later, when Ishmael had grown to manhood, Ibrahim received a command from Allah to visit his son in the Arabian desert. This meeting was not merely a family reunion, it was a divine mandate. Father and son were instructed to build the first house of worship dedicated to the one true God. Together, they constructed the Kaaba, the sacred black cube that Muslims around the world face in prayer. As they built, they prayed that their descendants would become a righteous nation, and that a prophet would arise among them to guide humanity. Centuries later, this prayer was answered when Muhammad, peace be upon him, a direct descendant of Ishmael, was born in Mecca and received the final revelation from Allah. The path from Ibrahim's prayer to its fulfillment was long and complex, marked by the rise and fall of both Jewish and Arab nations, periods of cooperation and conflict, and the gradual unfolding of Allah's plan for humanity. During the time of Musa, peace be upon him, the children of Israel were enslaved in Egypt and had largely forgotten the teachings of their forefather Ibrahim. Meanwhile, the descendants of Ishmael had spread throughout Arabia, but had largely abandoned the pure monotheism of their ancestor, turning instead to idol worship and tribal customs. Both peoples needed guidance, and Allah sent prophets to each community. To the children of Israel, He sent Musa, peace be upon him, with the Torah, freeing them from slavery and providing a comprehensive law to guide their lives. Allah established the children of Israel as a chosen people, promising them a land flowing with milk and honey if they remained faithful to His commands. The Quran acknowledges this special status, noting that Allah favored them above all other nations of their time, granting them prophets, kings, and blessings unmatched by any other people. Yet the Quran also recounts how the children of Israel repeatedly broke their covenant with Allah. They worshipped the golden calf while Musa, peace be upon him, was receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai. They complained about Allah's provisions in the wilderness and refused to enter the promised land when commanded, forcing Allah to make them wander for 40 years. Even after settling in the Holy Land, they continued to disobey His guidance, killing prophets and mixing pure religion with pagan practices. Allah sent prophet after prophet to call the Israelites back to the straight path. Dawood, peace be upon him, united them into a powerful kingdom and composed beautiful psalms praising Allah. His son Sulaiman, peace be upon him, built the magnificent temple in Jerusalem and ruled an empire that included both humans and jinn. Yet after Sulaiman's death, the kingdom split, and the children of Israel resumed their cycle of disobedience and rebellion. Meanwhile, the descendants of Ishmael also faced struggles in remaining faithful. After Ibrahim, peace be upon him, and Ishmael built the Kaaba, the Arabs continued to make pilgrimage to Mecca, preserving fragments of Ibrahim's pure monotheism. Over time, however, innovations and corruptions crept into their worship. Idols were placed in and around the Kaaba, claimed to serve as intermediaries to Allah. Complex tribal systems emerged, rooted in pride, revenge, and honor, often leading to cycles of warfare and bloodshed. Both peoples, descendants of Ibrahim, peace be upon him, had strayed from the pure monotheism of their forefather. Yet Allah's plan included guidance and redemption for both. To the Israelites, He sent Isa, peace be upon him, calling them back to the true spirit of Musa's law and teaching love, forgiveness, and spiritual purification. To the descendants of Ishmael, He would send Muhammad, peace be upon him, with the final revelation, the Quran, which would correct previous distortions and guide humanity until the end of time. The relationship between Jews and Arabs grew more complex during Isa's mission among the Israelites. Some accepted him as a prophet, but many rejected him, accusing him of blasphemy and plotting to kill him. Allah saved Isa, peace be upon him, from their schemes. The rejection of yet another prophet diminished the special status the Israelites had once enjoyed. As Isa's followers later formed Christianity and spread his message beyond the Jewish community, a new dynamic emerged. Christianity reached Arabia, where some Arab tribes converted, while others clung to ancestral idol worship. This set the stage for the arrival of the final prophet, who would complete Allah's guidance and reshape the spiritual relationship between all peoples, including Jews and Arabs. The birth of Muhammad, peace be upon him, in Mecca in 570 CE marked the beginning of a new chapter in this ongoing story. A direct descendant of Ishmael through his son Kedar, Muhammad fulfilled the ancient prophecy that a great nation would arise from Ishmael's lineage. At the age of 40, in the cave of Hira, he received his first revelation, initiating the final phase of Allah's plan. Muhammad's message was not entirely new. It reaffirmed the teachings of Ibrahim, Musa, and Isa. Worship Allah alone, establish justice, care for the poor and orphaned, and prepare for the day of judgment. Yet it carried a decisive difference. It was the final revelation, after which no prophets would follow. Revealed in Arabic, the language of Ishmael's descendants, it entrusted the Arabs with the responsibility of conveying Allah's ultimate guidance to humanity. This transformed the religious and political landscape of the Middle East. For centuries, the Israelites had been Allah's chosen people, receiving divine revelation and guidance. Now their half-brothers, the descendants of Ishmael, claim to have received the final and most complete revelation. The Quran, while affirming much of the Torah and Gospel, also critiqued Jews and Christians for distorting their scriptures and straying from the pure monotheism of Ibrahim, peace be upon him. The Quran addressed the children of Israel directly, reminding them of Allah's blessings while also criticizing their repeated disobedience. It condemned them for killing prophets, breaking covenants, mixing truth with falsehood, and claiming exclusive privileges with Allah that He had never granted. Most strikingly, the Quran declared that Allah's covenant had been transferred to the new Muslim community, the Ummah of Muhammad, peace be upon him, making Muslims the inheritors of the spiritual legacy once held exclusively by the Israelites. This theological shift had immediate consequences. When Muhammad, peace be upon him, began preaching in Mecca, he and his followers faced persecution from the Arab tribes, who profited from pilgrimages to the idol-filled Kaaba. In 622 CE, he and his followers migrated to Yathrib, later renamed Medina, a city where Jewish tribes lived alongside Arab clans. Muhammad initially hoped the Jews of Medina would recognize him as the prophet foretold in their scriptures and join the Muslim community. The early interactions were complex. Some Jews recognized Muhammad, peace be upon him, as a true prophet and converted to Islam. The Quran notes that those who accepted him did so as clearly as they recognized their own sons, indicating that the evidence of his prophethood was apparent to those who sincerely examined it. However, the majority rejected his message, creating tension and eventually leading to conflict. The Quran explains several reasons for this rejection. Some Jews expected the final prophet to emerge from their own people, not from their Arab cousins. Others allegedly altered or concealed portions of their scriptures that foretold Muhammad's coming. Many sought to preserve their privileged status as the sole possessors of divine revelation, rather than accepting the truth, regardless of its source. Tensions escalated when some Jewish tribes allegedly broke agreements with the Muslim community, aiding their enemies in battles against the early Muslims. Islamic historical sources recount plots against Muhammad, peace be upon him, including assassination attempts and collusion with pagan Arab tribes. These betrayals resulted in the expulsion of 2 Jewish tribes from Medina and the execution of the adult males of a 3rd tribe accused of treason. These events became a lasting source of tension between Muslims and Jews, interpreted differently by each side. Muslims saw a historical pattern of rejection and betrayal of Allah's prophets, while Jews saw an aggressive and unprecedented attack by an emerging Arab leader claiming divine authority. The conquest of Mecca in 630 CE marked another turning point. Muhammad, peace be upon him, entered Mecca triumphantly and destroyed the idols that had filled the Kaaba for centuries, restoring the house built by Ibrahim, peace be upon him, and Ishmael, to its original purpose as a center of pure monotheistic worship. Arabs, previously considered religiously inferior by Jews and Christians, were now the guardians of the holiest site in the faith, claiming to be the final and most perfect revelation from Allah. Following Muhammad's death in 632 CE, Islam rapidly expanded, profoundly reshaping the relationship between Jews and Arabs. Within a century, Muslim armies had conquered territories including Palestine, Syria, Iraq, Egypt, North Africa, and Spain, regions that had been home to Jewish communities for millennia. For the first time since the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, Jews were living under the rule of fellow descendants of Ibrahim, peace be upon him, rather than under pagan or Christian empires. The treatment of Jews under Muslim rule was complex and varied across time and place. Islamic law granted them the status of dhimmi, or protected people, allowing them to practice their religion and govern internal affairs in exchange for paying a tax and accepting certain social restrictions. Compared to the persecution Jews faced in Christian Europe, where they were often expelled, forced to convert, or killed, they generally experienced greater tolerance. Many Jewish communities flourished under Muslim rule, producing prominent scholars, physicians, philosophers, and poets. Yet the fundamental theological disagreement remained unresolved. Muslims maintained that Islam was the final and most complete religion, that the Quran was the uncorrupted word of Allah, and that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the last prophet, whose message superseded all previous revelations. This claim forever shaped the religious and historical relationship between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael. Jews continued to reject the Muslim claims, maintaining that the Torah represented the eternal covenant between Allah and the children of Israel, that no prophet would come after Musa, peace be upon him, to alter or abrogate the law, and that they remained Allah's chosen people, regardless of the actions of other nations. The Quran acknowledges that this disagreement would endure until the end of time, emphasizing that Allah could have made all humanity into a single community, with one religion, but instead chose to create diversity and test people through their differences. The Quran challenges Jews and Christians to compete with Muslims not in theological arguments, but in righteous deeds, suggesting that Allah will judge all communities on the Day of Judgment and reveal who truly followed His guidance. This theological framework allowed for centuries of coexistence between Jews and Muslims, yet it also planted the seeds of ongoing tension. Both communities believed they possessed the true interpretation of Allah's will. Both claimed spiritual authority from their connection to Ibrahim, peace be upon him, and both viewed themselves as legitimate heirs to the Holy Land promised to Ibrahim's descendants. The situation became far more complicated with the rise of modern Zionism in the late 19th century. Zionism, a movement to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine, was both religious and secular in nature. Religious Zionists saw the return to the Holy Land as the fulfillment of biblical prophecies and the start of the Messianic age, while secular Zionists viewed it as a solution to centuries of persecution and a path to Jewish survival in the modern world. Both forms of Zionism challenged the established order in Palestine, where Arab Muslims and Christians had been the majority for over a millennium. From the Islamic perspective, Zionism represented a fundamental challenge to divine order as revealed in the Quran. Muslims believed that Allah had transferred His covenant from the children of Israel to the Muslim Ummah because of Jewish disobedience and rejection of prophets. The idea that Jews could reclaim the Holy Land and establish political sovereignty seemed to contradict the Quranic narrative of Jewish spiritual decline and Muslim ascendancy. Moreover, the Zionist movement was supported primarily by European Christian powers, which Muslims associated with centuries of colonial oppression and crusades against Islamic lands. The establishment of Israel in 1948 brought this ancient theological conflict into the modern political arena with explosive consequences. For the first time since the destruction of the Second Temple, Jews gained political sovereignty in the Holy Land, but at the cost of displacing hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs, most of whom traced their ancestry back to the early Arab conquests of the 7th century. Islamic eschatology provides a framework for understanding these developments beyond mere politics. According to the Quran and authentic prophetic traditions, the return of Jews to the Holy Land and their rise to power is not a sign of renewed divine favor, but a prelude to their final judgment. These texts describe a future time near the end of the world, when the children of Israel will gather in the Holy Land, become powerful and arrogant, and then face a devastating defeat that will humble them before Allah. These prophecies have profoundly influenced how many Muslims interpret the current Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Rather than seeing it as a territorial dispute resolvable through diplomacy, many perceive it as part of a cosmic struggle between truth and falsehood, ultimately subject to divine intervention. This perspective makes compromise difficult, as political negotiation can be seen as a betrayal of Allah's revealed truth. Islamic prophetic traditions outline signs preceding the final resolution of this conflict, including the appearance of the Dajjal, the false Messiah, who will deceive many and claim divinity for himself. According to these traditions, many Jews will initially follow the Dajjal, mistaking him for their awaited Messiah. Then Isa, peace be upon him, will return, defeat the Dajjal, and establish justice and peace on earth. These eschatological beliefs influence the attitudes of many Muslims toward the modern conflict. If the establishment of Israel and the gathering of Jews in the Holy Land are seen as signs of the approaching end times, then resistance to Israel is often viewed not merely as political activism, but as a religious duty. Conversely, any Muslim leader who seeks peace with Israel may be accused of betraying Islamic principles, seen as delaying the ultimate triumph of truth over falsehood. From the Jewish perspective, the issues are equally complex and deeply theological. Many religious Jews interpret the establishment of Israel and the return to the Holy Land as the beginning of the messianic process, which will culminate in the coming of the Messiah and the rebuilding of the Temple in Jerusalem. From this view, Jewish sovereignty in the Holy Land is not a political coincidence, but the fulfillment of divine promises made to Ibrahim, peace be upon him, Isaac, and their descendants thousands of years ago. This creates a profound theological deadlock that transcends politics. Muslims believe that Allah permanently transferred his covenant from the children of Israel to the Muslim Ummah because of Jewish disobedience and their rejection of Muhammad, peace be upon him. Jews maintain that Allah's covenant with them is eternal and unconditional, and that no subsequent revelation can abrogate the promises granted in the Torah. Both communities possess sacred texts, prophetic traditions, and theological frameworks that reinforce their positions, making compromise exceptionally difficult. The Quran itself frames this conflict as ongoing, declaring that it will continue until Allah intervenes on the Day of Judgment. It states that the children of Israel will be gathered from all nations and judged according to their deeds. Those who truly believe and act righteously will be rewarded, while those who persist in disbelief and corruption will face punishment. Similarly, it reminds Muslims that salvation depends not on ancestry or identity, but on faith and righteous action. This perspective offers both hope and caution. It suggests that ultimate resolution lies beyond human politics, requiring divine intervention and the establishment of true justice that transcends human biases and claims. Yet it also emphasizes that righteousness and justice outweigh ethnic or religious identity. From the Quranic viewpoint, the Jewish-Arab conflict is not merely a story of ancient rivalry or modern politics. It is the unfolding of a divine plan, beginning with Ibrahim, peace be upon him, and culminating with the return of Isa, peace be upon him, to establish Allah's kingdom on earth. Understanding this perspective does not require literal belief, but it highlights the profound influence of this narrative on how millions interpret events and make decisions about war and peace. The Quran's account offers vital lessons. It warns against ethnic and religious pride, underscores the importance of justice and righteous conduct over identity, and emphasizes the ultimate unity of humanity under Allah's sovereignty. Ibrahim, peace be upon him, was neither Jewish nor Arab, neither Christian nor Muslim. He was simply a righteous man who submitted entirely to Allah's will. His example suggests that the path to peace lies not in asserting competing claims to divine favor, but in returning to the pure monotheism and righteous conduct he exemplified. Whether one views the Quranic account as divine revelation or as an influential religious narrative, its impact on the Jewish-Arab conflict is undeniable. For over 14 centuries, it has shaped how Muslims understand their relationship with Jews and their role in world history. It will continue to influence events in the Middle East and beyond, until either human wisdom and divine guidance bring resolution, or Allah himself establishes the justice and peace both communities ultimately seek. The ancient promise made to Ibrahim, peace be upon him, that his descendants would become great nations has been fulfilled. Both the children of Isaac and the children of Ishmael have created remarkable civilizations, contributed profoundly to human knowledge and culture, and preserved their faith in the one true God through centuries of trial and persecution. Perhaps the time has come for both communities to remember their shared father, their common heritage, and their joint responsibility to establish justice and righteousness on earth, rather than continue disputing who is more deserving of Allah's favor. In the end, the Quran teaches that Allah's favor belongs to those who fear him and act righteously, regardless of lineage, ethnicity, or religious label.